Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome, you friends, you neighbors, you comrades, all you citizens of the world. It's time for another edition of the Live from the Heartland. I'm Michael James, your host for today, and I'm up here in Chicago's wonderful blue 49th Ward. Today I have two pals on the show. Actually, I have three. We're going to start off with our friend and Andy Davis and Jeff Biggers. And the two of them have worked together on a new book called Disturbing the Bones. You know, it starts out in Chicago and it goes to Southern Illinois. It's up in Russia and Siberia. It's going to be something else. Andy, give us a little overview of what your new book is all about.
Well, it's, I think they're calling it a political thriller. And it's basically a story about several investigations that are going on, one involving the discovery of a woman in an archaeological dig in Cairo, Illinois. And a young archaeologist is finding the remains of something that doesn't belong in this incredible find, which is 26 layers going back 13,000 years. And she winds up discovering that this woman, as she takes the remains to the FBI in Chicago, it turns out to be a reporter who was down in Cairo, Illinois, infamous Cairo, Illinois, where Jeff knows the area. He's the Southern Illinois part of this team. And it turns out that she was found in a trench. And so it's a story about who killed this person. It turns out she had a 14-year-old son who's a cop in Chicago. This happened in the 70s. And he's now like 60 years old. He's a cop in Chicago. His buddy calls him in from the FBI, says, they found your mother. After all these years, not knowing whatever happened to his mom. So it's a very emotional story. And it turns out this young archaeologist, her grandfather was in the Klan. And his mother was involved in covering the disturbances in Cairo, racial struggles in Cairo for Ebony magazine. So there's a racial in the heat of the night kind of quality to it there. Jeff, you go on the rest.
From there, you just keep peeling back layers, Michael. It's an incredible kind of edge of your seat type thriller, you know, very much in the tradition of Andy Davis movies like The Fugitive and The Package and Under Siege. And think about it. Today is the anniversary that Under Siege came out in 1992, and the New York Times praised that incredible film and said it blends art and action to ask provocative questions about nuclear weapons and what's happening in the world today. And that's exactly what Andy's doing with this new thriller.
Well, it's getting some compliments already. A propulsive debut political thriller set in the aftermath of a global nuclear weapons crisis from the acclaimed filmmaker of The Fugitive, Andy Davis. Also, Michael Mann says a knife-edged investigation that morphs into a political thriller about a world on the brink, an ingenious page-turner.
It's also indigenous because it deals with the Native Americans.
Good. I've been to the mounds down there. I had to pick up a friend who was incarcerated downstate, and you know, I've been through Cairo a number of times, and I remember back when there was a lot of civil rights activity, and Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was in there. I gave a talk at the University of Southern Illinois way back and roamed around the territory. Andy, what led you to write this? You know, most of your films, and I'm grateful and happy to be in some of them, you working off of someone else's book or script. This time, you talked to me a long time ago about doing this, and I assumed you were making a script. The next thing I know, you've got a book coming out with our friend Jeff. And talk about how this all came to be, how you decided to write a book first, and I assume and hope there'll be a film to follow.
Well, it sort of didn't happen that way. First of all, I had an idea to do this story based upon this archaeological dig years ago. The metaphor being, we will be remembered by our missile silos, our bunkers. You know, when they scrape all the crap away after we blow each other up, right? And so I was working on this idea for a long time, and then I said, okay, I'll write a screenplay and I experimented a little bit, and I found Jeff, and Michael's responsible in many ways for this book. All you Michael fans and Heartland fans.
Well, I think you were both on the radio show the same day, and that's how you met.
How we met, but we were in the Heartland Cafe, which is a much deeper story in my own personal life. I'll tell you later. But anyway, so we started working on the screenplay together. Jeff had written this great book called Reckoning at Eagle Creek about his family's history with coal mining and mountaintop removal and the tragedy of. And he had this real in-depth understanding of Southern Illinois and what was going on down there with the Union Army headquarters, further south in Louisville, where Dred Scott was nearby imprisoned, right? Anyway, so we started working on the screenplay, and I got frustrated because, his screenplay's got to be tight. It's got to seem like it's working 2 hours, and you can't describe a lot of backstory. So I said, let's just write the novel. And that's what happened. And so we flushed it out, and each of us brought what we could to it, and kept going back and forth with drafts. And I was very grateful that this great wordsmith was able to help this kid with a Chicago public school education.
That's good. That's good. And Jeff, you were some of the time while you were writing this, you were also writing your latest book in Sardinia, and you were living over there. And I think now you're back in Iowa, and Andy's out there in California. How did you work together on this? I mean, is it all due to the computer, telephone? Did you get together? What was the teamwork like, and the play-by-play, if you will?
As we all learned during COVID, we certainly can work online very efficiently, just like we're doing now with Zoom. And so here's Andy in his office in California. I'm in my office in the Midwest. And we're really side by side working on the manuscript, sending it back and forth, each of us taking turns writing on the manuscript, making different edits and changes. And, it's an incredible experience because you have two sets of eyes. You have two editors. You're constantly challenging each other on character development, on context. And what I learned so much.
Punctuation, words.
What I learned from Andy was the sense of pacing. To write a thriller really takes an incredible aptitude for understanding the pacing and the timing. And that's truly what Andy knows. And I think that's what we learned about working on this novel, is having two completely different views thrown into the same room, someone from Chicago, someone from Southern Illinois, and then we come up with this kind of storyline, which we really hope will not only entertain but challenge our readers.
What's interesting is that how the characters grew. I had this cop from Chicago who lost his mother at 14, and this young archaeologist who went to Yale, but she's sponsored by the bad guy in the story, who's an Army Corps of Engineers master builder, bunker builder, right? And he's got these weapons programs going on, and so each of these characters sort of evolved. And what Jeff brought a lot to it was the kind of emotional insight of these people. So what happens if you're a 14-year-old kid and you don't know what happened to your mother? Did she run off? Did she disappear? Was she killed? Is she coming back? And in the story, it's very interesting. I grew up on the South Side. Michelle Obama was at the next high school at South Shore. I went to Bowen, right? And in the story, this young 14-year-old comes back to Chicago when his mother disappears, and there's this young girl in his class in the South Side, and she protects him from the tough kids. And now she's running for president, and she gets elected. And he's got to be her bodyguard in Chicago. So it's really woven into this Chicago fabric. And the thing is, the reason she gets elected, because she's a good candidate and she's running against a complete asshole, right? There's an accident. The Russians are testing these missiles. They can put a nuke anywhere in the world in an hour right now. And there's an accident that goes terribly wrong. It's being monitored where this highway is being built in Southern Illinois that the archaeologist is working on. To Scott Air Force Base, where in our story, they monitor all the Russian missile tests. And something goes wrong, and a missile goes off and kills 150,000 people one day in Siberia and Mongolia. Weeks before an election. And the world goes crazy. Say, this is insane. Not only these things can go off accidentally and kill us. So we have to get rid of them. And she says, if I get elected, we're going to have a big peace conference in Chicago where the atom was split in Hyde Park, right? we're going to, and this general in Southern Illinois says, over my dead bodies on Fox News, he's going, we can't do this. Is capitulation. This is, we're giving it all up if we give away our weapons. So that's what the story's about, as it was in the package. So the package was an inspiration from a story point of view that was that story that was created around the arms treaty between Gorbachev and Bush.
I was going to ask you about that, because in the package where you gave me a role that's my least favorite, I had to play a Nazi and yell, "Come and get it, you effing commies," and stuff like that. But
I think in Stony Island, you were a despicable uncle. So you're very good at those parts.
You've had me play bad guys, and once in a while a cop. I'm waiting. And once I was a fisherman. We'll save that for another time. But talk a little bit more about the package and how that influenced this current, Disturbing the Bones.
Well, I just thought the concept of, we have this dilemma. There's those people who argue, well, nobody's used these weapons since Hiroshima, and we've got this kind of stalemate going on. And now, with this tension in Ukraine and tensions with China and Russia, these little countries are saying, like Poland and other European countries, we need our own nukes. So it's getting crazier. So the generals are going to say, you think we're going to give up all of our nuclear weapons and let these other countries have them? So how is it that you can have a consensus of everybody giving them up? And if there was this terrible tragedy where you're witnessing this many people die in one day, and the coverage is mind-boggling, could it shift world opinion in such a way that the people of the world literally demanded the ending of this kind of insanity?
Who did the research on this? I mean, there's a lot of technical stuff. Is that things that Jeff did, that you did, or you have other people helping you out?
Jeff did a lot of it.
Yeah, I think we both brought in our backgrounds, and so Andy's done several films that deal, of course, with the arms race and with the military and diplomacy. And then I brought in a lot of bit of the background about Southern Illinois and the civil rights movement. Of course, Andy's worked on that quite a bit as well. Think about it. 20 years ago when Holes came out, that was based on Louis Sachar's great novel. But Andy put a twist on that movie that was amazing. And once again, the New York Times talked about how that movie was not just for kids, but it was an allegory about greed and racism and a lot of the social division that we see today. And once again, Andy's following up very much in a continuum of his career with this thriller on issues that he's dealt with his whole life. So the research really came from both of us.
But this guy is known as someone who writes about culture and the environment, but he brought so much to this in terms of being a novelist.
We even have a Chicago cop whose parents are from Sardinia. So I did get in a little bit of Sardinia.
Well, the last time you were on this show was talking about that book in Sardinia, and people can get that at youtube.com/Heartland Media and then punch in your name. But I would like to ask you both, to start with Andy, who influenced you? One of the things that I know about you is that you have progressive parents. You lived next door to the Heartland Cafe, and when you were a little kid, you were waiting for your dad to come home from the Second World War, and you asked everyone who got off the L, "Are you my dad?"
No, that was my sister.
That was your sister did that?
I was created when he got home.
Okay, good. But I know
we're bookend war babies, But anyway, that's very interesting because the Heartland Cafe was literally steps away from the entrance to our apartment complex.
1411 West Lund, I think you were.
1422.
22.
And it was a one-bedroom apartment that my parents had a pull-out couch in. And my mother lived there because her father lived in the next building, and her mother. So my dad was gone during the war. My sister lived with my mother there in Rogers Park. And on the corner where the Heartland Cafe was the bakery. So I literally was fed bread from the corner from the Heartland. And then 2 doors down was a fish store, fish seller, who had dirty fingernails and scales all over. But if you went in there, he would give you a cough drop for free.
A guy came in one time who had delivered groceries from that corner store and told me how there were Jews and Catholic kids, and we worked together and we got 10 cents a delivery. He came in the restaurant, looked around, had some food, and I was hoping he'd come back, but he was already old. But
yeah. Anyway,
so let me ask you a little bit more about your dad. And this is partly my cousin Adam, who you know, who also comes up on the show doing sports. He was curious about your dad's influence on you, and I'm kind of interested in both your mom and dad. I know they were both progressives. Your mom was a school teacher. Your dad was an actor. And when he passed away, we had a great memorial for him at the Heartland. But maybe how you and your love for Chicago got influenced.
Well, my parents met as young actors in the Chicago Repertory Group. And a key figure for both Jeff and I, Studs Terkel, started this group. And so they were young people with Studs, and Studs cast my dad Nate in some theater. And they were anti-fascists. They were, lefties who were performing on picket lines and doing all kinds of progressive theater. And then, years later, Studs recommended me to Haskell Wexler, who became my mentor in the film business. So there's a triangle there between, and my parents used to do theater and skits with their friends. I grew up watching the Weavers, and Pete Seeger and all the anti-war stuff. There were friends who were harassed by the FBI. There was a lot of that going on. So I grew up in, I went to Selma after the march to walk on Montgomery. And then I was doing voter registration. So we were raised to be progressive activists. I mean, I didn't reject my parents' politics, put it that way. Okay?
That's good.
Yeah. And so anyway, you were the one of the icons of the left-wing movement in Chicago in the 60s. When I got out in 68, you were, the guy to know if you're going to be involved in causing trouble.
Well, I remember I got the word. I was at the Y. Someone said, this guy, Andy Davis, is looking for you. And then I remember when we met and I had to tell him that I wasn't a hillbilly from uptown with left-wing politics. My dad actually produced Broadway plays. You said, oh, that's okay. Jeff, let me ask you what some major influences on you. I've read a number of your books about coal country in Southern Illinois, about the Tarahumara Indians when you lived over that way. I didn't read in Sardinia, but I read a lot about it. Give us a little bit about what led you to be a progressive, active dude.
Well, I mean, the hillbillies in Uptown, that's the kind of stock I come from. When the coal mines collapsed in the 50s, my grandparents had to go up to Chicago and uncles and work in the steel mills. And they didn't last long. They eventually trickled back down. His health, he was already falling apart from black lung disease. But that whole uptown Chicago world, of course, first place that Bill Monroe ever recorded. You had so many people from Southern Illinois and Eastern Kentucky who came in, of course, to uptown that you have written about and know about personally. And, I come from that background of my dad was a crusading civil rights activist. My mom, too, coal miner's daughter. They did what they could in the Midwest. And at a certain point, they were fed up and packed up the old 60 Chevy and moved out west to La Frontera. So I grew up actually outside of Tucson in that milieu. My father worked with the farm workers and so many different people. But I think what we're doing, here and what you both have done really inspires me is that we're trying to make great art. We're trying to make great entertainment, but we're also trying to challenge people and galvanize people for social action. I think we're pretty unabashed, Michael, that this is an anti-war novel. We're trying to talk about, that we are on the brink, that there is no fail-safe moment anymore, and that we really need to talk about these issues in a certain way that brings everybody to the table. And that's what this book is really about. It's an incredible political thriller that touches on the very issues that are the burning ground right today in our societies.
Has the book been released yet?
It will come on October 22nd, which is actually the first event in Chicago, of all places, we'll be doing an evening reading at the great Anderson's bookstore there in Naperville. You have to get a ticket. It's kind of a big deal. But at October 22nd at 7 p.m., we'll be at Anderson's bookstore in Naperville. And the Chicago writer Luis Urrea will also be there probably with us.
Who gave us a great quote. I'm very looking forward to meet Luis. And then keep going, Jeff. We got some great events in Chicago. We'd like to invite everybody who can come to. The next big one is going to be at Columbia College. But before that, on Wednesday at Northwestern, we're going to be at Northwestern. Natalie Moore, the great journalist, now professor at Northwestern, is going to interview us, who wrote incredible material about Chicago and the South Side and the Keystone Nation. She's an amazing journalist and a sociologist, I think, And then we're going to be that evening, 11 o'clock at Northwestern, and then that evening at 6:30 at Columbia College. If someone Jeff knows, a great filmmaker, is going to have us there.
That's on October 23rd, a Wednesday evening, at the Film Cinema there at Columbia College.
Well, on this interview, when we send out the announcement, we'll include the places you're going to be. We only have a couple minutes left, and I'm going to throw this question to Andy, but if you want to get into it too. And this, again, comes from my cousin Adam, who also has been in Andy's flicks. And he says, this year is the 70th anniversary of The Seventh Samurai by Kurosawa. And he says Spielberg and Lucas and others have credited this film as the inspiration for all action films today. And he was curious, Andy, to know what you thought of that.
Well, it's interesting. When I was a kid, my sister was in Madison and going to college, right? And I went up to visit her one weekend, and she was busy with her boyfriend or something, and her boyfriend's buddies took me to the theater right downtown Madison. It was the Magnificent Seven with that Marlboro music, right? And John Alonzo, who was an actor in it, later became a cameraman who recommended me to do a movie called Lepke as a DP, as a director of photography. So the Magnificent Seven is what I can relate to. Bum, bum, ba, bum, bum, ba, bum, ba, bum. That's what got me into movies.
I love that movie. That was good. Well, do either of you want to share with the masses who are listening to this what your next project is? Writing adapting the novel into a screenplay. How long will that take, Andy?
With AI and some sleight of hand, probably about 4 years.
Okay. I hope you still have a part for a really old guy then.
Yeah.
And how
Michael,
about you,
thank you so much. Great, Hal. Thank the whole team.
All right. Thank you, Michael. We have a great evil role for you to play. So.
And the package, which Michael is in, is playing Saturday at 11 in the morning at the Chicago Historical Museum. The package, we're going to talk about the relationship between that movie and the novel, Disturbing the Bones.
Yeah, everybody come see me play a Nazi. Oh, God. Okay, brothers, I really love both of you, and it's great to see you so early in the morning, both in California and Iowa, and I'm in Illinois.